So, what makes me cranky about King Arthur, Legend of the Sword? That the legend of this sword is going to be how King Arthur broke the damn thing because he treats it like crap. Not only does he do that stupid movie thing where they stick the sword in the ground like a shovel, which is a wonderful way to break the tip off on a rock, but there are points in the movie where he's just dragging Excalibur along the stones behind him as he's walking along the road. I get that in this movie it's basically the sword form of Thor's hammer, so it's essentially indestructible, but it's freaking Excalibur! Show it some respect! Side note, I wonder what Excalibur's preferred pronouns are. I mean, it is kind of impersonal, but I wouldn't want to misgender it because the Lady of the Lake might reach out of a puddle and drown me or something. Anyway, other than the callous disregard for Excalibur shown by our new King Arthur, the biggest problem with this movie is how over-stylized it is. They seem so desperate to defy the audience's expectations for a King Arthur movie that they just tried whatever came to mind at the time. It ends up feeling like a demo reel of the different ways you could make a modern take on the Arthur legend. Sometimes they play it straight and treat it like it's a grand medieval epic, and then sometimes they play it like it's a Simon Pegg-style send-up, like Hot Fuzz or something. One of the most jarring tonal shifts is when they start doing that thing from Ant-Man where someone is telling a story while we get a flashback, and then in the flashback the characters are mimicking the narration that's going on over the flashback. Granted, it's pretty funny, but it feels completely out of place compared to how serious everything was before that. Sometimes the action is shot wide and clear for some good old-fashioned melee combat, and then sometimes it turns into a superhero movie where CGI Arthur is speed-ramping around, breaking swords, and exploding things just by swinging Excalibur. There's even a point in this movie where suddenly we're viewing it from each character's personal GoPro. And the worst thing about that is how cheated you feel when the movie switches from some really awesome action to something that seems like it would be really awesome if you could tell what the hell was actually happening. That's true of both the visuals and of the story itself, because there's so much this movie doesn't explain, and so many things that just make you go, huh? Like, where did that giant snake come from? Did the mage girl do that? How do her powers work anyway? The mages at the beginning of the movie were straight up vaporizing people. Can she do that too? But spelling it out for you wouldn't be artsy, and Guy Ritchie was on an acid trip when he directed that part, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. It also totally screws up the pacing, because every time it feels like this movie is building to something, it switches styles and starts snarking its way through character development. It's really difficult to connect to the characters or figure out what exactly they mean to each other when you're flash-forwarding through their history or just skipping a character moment in favor of some winking at the camera. It's really unfortunate because this movie does have a pretty good sense of humor, and the stuff that works really well. Arthur being a wise-ass scoundrel is a fun and different take on his origin from what we normally see, and Charlie Hunnam does a good job with that material, but it would have worked so much better if he were a wise-ass in the context of the serious movie with which they had actually started. Similarly, the superhero CGI stuff would be fine if we had any idea how magic works in this universe, or if the editors didn't go completely bonkers half the time. Seems like the answers to what characters can and cannot do is, hey, whatever looks cool right now is fair game. Feel like if Thor picked up the hammer and then just started shooting laser blasts from his eyes without any explanation, and then half the time you couldn't tell who the laser blasts were actually hitting because they started cutting from his eyes to close-ups of chests being burned. So there's probably a really great movie in here somewhere, but it's totally mucked up by the attempts to give it some kind of flair. If they had picked a tone and stuck with it, it would have been an easy recommendation for opening weekend, but since it's all over the place and there's nothing especially epic that warrants seeing it on the big screen, I can't think of any reason to go see this in the theater, unless you really have a thing for Charlie Hunnam. Eventually it'll come out on Netflix and be a halfway decent way to spend a couple hours, but until then, save your money. That's what I thought about King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you wish to serve your once and future King Lizard in his conquest of YouTube, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel.